The wind had teeth that night, sharp and cold as it whipped through the valley and clawed at the bones of the old barn. Every gust made the walls groan, and the loose tin on the roof rattled like a warning. The lantern hanging from the rafter swayed wildly, throwing long, trembling shadows across the dirt floor. Clara stood in the doorway, half-drenched, her hair plastered to her cheeks. Her fingers clutched a folded piece of paper so tight it had gone soft at the edges. She had been riding for hours through the storm, chasing a truth she no longer wanted to carry. The mare she'd borrowed was somewhere outside, reins tied loosely to the post, head hung low against the wind. It didn't matter now. She'd made it here, to him. Silas stood a few paces from the fire, his back to her. The orange light caught the edges of his shoulders, hard and still beneath his worn shirt. He hadn't spoken yet, only turned his head slightly when she burst in, his silence cutting deeper than any curse could have. For a moment, Clara thought she might turn back, leave the letter on the table, disappear into the rain, and let him find it when morning came. But her legs wouldn't move. She had rehearsed this in her mind for weeks, and the words burned too hot in her throat to swallow any longer. "I can't hold it in anymore," she gasped, and even she was startled by how raw her voice sounded. Silas turned fully now, the lines around his eyes deepening as the firelight flickered across his face. He didn't step closer, but she felt the weight of his gaze settle on her like the heat from the hearth. Unforgiving, steady, impossible to ignore. "What is it you can't hold in?" he asked quietly, though his tone carried something heavier than curiosity. Clara swallowed hard. Her pulse drummed in her ears, her breath misting in the cold air between them. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands, but the ink had already started to run from the rain. The words blurred, but she didn't need to read them. She knew every line by heart. "It's about the ranch," she said finally, the sound of her own confession cutting through the storm like a splinter. "It isn't yours anymore. The bank, they sold it, and they're coming for it. Tonight, maybe by morning." Silas didn't move. The logs cracked in the fire, spitting sparks. He looked down at the floor, then back up at her, slow and deliberate. "What are you talking about? I paid that note 2 months ago." Clara shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "No, you didn't. I took the money. I thought I could fix things first. I thought I could make it right before you found out. But the mine failed, Silas. Every last dollar's gone." For a moment, there was no sound at all. Even the wind seemed to draw back and hold its breath. Silas's face was unreadable, though the muscles in his jaw tightened. He looked toward the door as if trying to see through the storm, through the past weeks of silence and distance between them. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but it was the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. "You stole from me?" Clara flinched. "I borrowed," she said, though even as she spoke it, the word sounded like a lie. "I meant to pay it back. I thought, if the silver vein hit." He turned away from her, running a hand through his hair, staring into the fire as if it could burn the truth out of existence. "You risked everything we've built because of a rumor in a mountain?" "I was trying to save you," she cried, the words tearing from her throat. "You were losing cattle, the fence line needed repair, and you wouldn't ask for help. You'd rather break yourself in half than owe anyone a cent. I thought if I could make it right." Her voice cracked under the weight of it. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "But I was wrong." Silas didn't answer. He stood there, his shadow long against the wall, his breath shallow and even. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains like distant cannon fire. Clara watched the back of him, waiting for the outburst, for the rage she knew she deserved. But none came. Only silence. The letter slipped from her hand, fluttering to the floor. The ink-stained paper landed near his boots, a wet testament to her failure. She wanted to reach for it, to tear it apart before he could read it. But she couldn't move. When he finally turned toward her again, his expression had changed. The hardness was still there, but beneath it was something else, something she couldn't name. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if realizing how much of herself she'd spent trying to protect him in all the wrong ways. "Clara," he said softly, her name sounding strange in the quiet. She met his gaze through a blur of tears. "I never meant to hurt you." The wind pushed against the barn doors again, making them shudder in their hinges. The lantern flickered, casting their shadows closer together. And though she didn't know what he would say or do next, she knew one thing for certain. The storm outside wasn't half as fierce as the one she had just unleashed between them. Silas didn't speak for a long time after that. The storm had quieted some, though the rain still whispered against the tin roof, steady and cold. The fire had burned low, throwing out more smoke than light, and the smell of wet earth drifted through the cracks in the barn walls. Clara stood motionless, arms wrapped around herself, feeling the chill creep up her spine. He was still by the hearth, the letter lying on the floor between them like a wound neither could step over. His hat hung from one hand, his shoulders heavy beneath the dim light. She had expected shouting, maybe a slammed door, maybe the sound of boots leaving for good. Instead, there was only silence thick enough to drown in. When he finally moved, it wasn't toward her. He walked to the window, brushed the curtain aside, and stared out into the dark. The rain streaked down the glass in crooked lines, the reflection of his face ghostly and unreadable. "They'll come before dawn," he said quietly. "Men like that don't wait for morning." Clara swallowed hard. "Then let me go. Let me face them. I'll tell them it was me, that you had no part in it." He shook his head slowly. "And what then? You think they'll listen? You think they care who signed what, long as they get the land?" His voice was low, steady, but beneath it was a rough edge she'd never heard before. "No, they'll take everything anyway, and they'll make sure neither of us stays to see it." She didn't know what to say. She wanted to beg forgiveness, but the words felt useless now. Too small to mend what she'd broken. The fire snapped once, sending a spark into the air. Silas turned back toward her, and in that flicker of light, something in his expression changed, like a decision settling into place. He crossed the room in a few long strides, his boots leaving wet prints on the floorboards. Clara stepped back instinctively, uncertain. He passed her without a word and reached for the old rifle that hung above the mantel. The same rifle his father had carried, the one he'd sworn he'd never use again after the war. Her breath caught. "Silas, no, please." He checked the chamber, then lowered the weapon and held it out, not to threaten her, but to offer it. "Take it," he said. She blinked at him, confused. "What?" "You're riding with me." What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled. "After everything I've done, you still—" He nodded once, firm. "You made a mistake. A bad one. But it's done now. If the ranch is going to be taken, it'll be taken from both of us standing." Clara stared at the rifle as if it were a live thing. Her fingers hovered over the worn stock, the cool metal gleaming in the firelight. "You'd fight for me after I ruined you?" Silas's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. "You didn't ruin me, Clara. You just reminded me what I still got worth losing." The sound of the rain filled the silence that followed. For a moment she couldn't move. Then she took the rifle, her hands trembling under its weight. It felt wrong and right at the same time, like holding her guilt in solid form. Silas walked to the saddle rack by the door, grabbing his coat and his revolver belt. He spoke as he worked, his tone level, practical. "We'll ride to the ridge. The high ground's ours. If they come through the south fence, we'll see their lanterns before they see us." "Silas," she whispered, not sure whether to plead or thank him. He looked over his shoulder, eyes softer now, voice low. "You still trust me to lead?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "More than I trust myself." He gave a short nod. "Then that's enough." The storm was beginning to ease outside, but the air was thick with the promise of dawn. Silas pulled open the barn doors and the wind rushed in again, carrying the scent of wet grass and mud. The world beyond was dark, endless, and uncertain. He stepped out first, his silhouette framed against the gray horizon. For a heartbeat, Clara stayed where she was, staring at the life she'd nearly destroyed. The firelight, the table, the boots by the door. Then she followed him, clutching the rifle to her chest. The horses stamped nervously, their breath rising in clouds. Silas untied the reins and handed her the mare's lead. "We'll make it right," he said. "One way or another." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that redemption could come riding through the storm, that forgiveness could be earned on the back of a tired horse in the middle of nowhere. As they mounted up, the wind caught her hair, and for the first time in weeks, she lifted her head to the horizon. The clouds were breaking, the faintest blush of light peeking through.